At my husband's funeral, I got a message: they buried the wrong man. While mourning my husband, a stranger whispered, "He isn't dead." At the graveside, I got a note: "He's alive, but don't tell anyone." My husband's coffin was lowered, then I heard his voice. The funeral was silent, until I got a text: "Don't trust the family." They lowered my husband into the ground, and the straps on the rigging sang like a throat-clearing, rubbed nylon over steel, a sound I felt in my teeth. Rain threaded through the cedars at Green Ridge Cemetery, beating my coat, slipping beneath my collar. I kept one palm on the mahogany lid as if it were a living shoulder and whispered, "I'm here," because saying it out loud held me together better than breathing. A hand brushed mine. I turned, expecting an ant, a pitying squeeze. Instead, a paper edge scraped my skin. A folded square, damp but crisp, pressed into my palm, and then the hand was gone, just a dark sleeve disappearing between umbrellas, the smell of wet wool and aftershave in its wake. My fingers closed around the note without thinking, the way you catch a glass that's falling and only afterward feel the sting. Mrs. Carter. The funeral director, Delaney, stood a careful step away. His hair was shellacked flat against his skull. "We'll lower now." "I can see that," I said. My voice came out softer than I felt. Marco's sister, Lila, peered around her umbrella. Her mouth pinched the way it did when she thought I was making a scene. "It's almost over," she whispered, like a correction. The straps hissed, the brass handles caught a smear of gray light, and the casket descended. The lilies at my feet were already browning at the edges, sweet and too heavy in the air. I dug my thumb into the crease of the note inside my fist and felt my pulse throb against the paper. "Don't open it." "Not here." I told myself that and then did it anyway, angling my body so the back of the umbrella hid me. The paper had been folded into quarters. The ink bled a little where the rain had kissed it, but the words were legible, sharp as a slap. They buried the wrong man. I felt the ground tilt, just a degree, the way a ferry does when you step from the dock and commit. The note lay in my palm like a hot coal. I shut it, slipped it into the pocket with the scratchy tissue I hadn't used, and stared at the hole in the earth where my husband was vanishing. Lila touched my elbow. "You should come to the tent," she said. "You're soaked." "Not yet," I said. She looked at the pocket where I'd tucked the note. "What's that?" "Nothing." I gave her the kind of smile you put on for TSA. Her eyes flicked to the funeral director, then back to me. "We agreed on a closed casket for a reason. Don't complicate things." I let that float in the rain between us. The casket settled with a low thunk onto whatever waited beneath, and the caretakers set the straps clacking back through the rigging. The sound made me think of nights I'd listened to Marco grind his teeth and nudged him with my knee until the rhythm broke. Delaney cleared his throat, a small, practiced kindness. "If the family wishes to say a last few words." Lila's mother stepped forward with a tissue wadded into a pearl. "He was a good boy," she said to the dark rectangle, and to me she said, "He loved the ocean," as if love were explanation enough for a storm. "He hated lilies," I thought, because they always made him sneeze. "They smell like church," he'd say, rubbing his nose, and I'd tease, "You sound like a sinner." But I said none of that aloud. I kept one hand in my pocket, feeling the note burn. After the small speeches, too many adjectives, not enough air, people drifted under a white canopy to sip burnt coffee and pick at triangle sandwiches. The rain slackened to a mist. The cemetery workers stood with their hands in their sleeves, waiting for the last person to leave so they could do the rest. I lingered near the grave until Delaney approached again, his mouth forming professionalism around compassion. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "if you need anything." "I need to see the identification paperwork," I said. He blinked. "Of course. We can schedule. Now." His eyes slid toward the family tent, then back. Perhaps we could discuss that at the office. It's warmer. I nodded, and he exhaled, relieved, as if warmth were the point. The funeral home office smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet. A printer whirred in the corner. Delaney led me past framed certificates to a desk where a manila folder sat with my name in block letters, Carter, Marco. My fingers shook when he flipped it open, anger or cold, I couldn't tell. He placed a page in front of me, a form, boxes checked, signatures looped with the kind of confidence people have when they know no one is going to question them. Identification was confirmed by dental records, he said. And a personal item. He slid over a phone in an evidence bag, Marco's battered case with the cracked edge, a sticker of a tiny red bicycle peeling at the corner. It looked right. It also looked like a thing someone could steal. Dental records, I repeated, and heard how flat it sounded. I looked at the diagram, a little tooth map, numbers marching. A typed note at the bottom read, tooth number 14, porcelain fused to metal crown. My mouth moved faster than my self-control. That's wrong. Delaney's polite face did a small, precise rearrangement, the way people shift pictures on a wall to avoid admitting it's crooked. The medical examiner. Marco had a gold crown on 14, I said. He chipped it on popcorn. He fussed with it when he was nervous, he'd catch it with his tongue. We joked it made him sound expensive. I'm very sorry, Delaney murmured, which was not a response. I pulled out my phone with wet fingers and scrolled until I found the last bill from Dr. Nguyen's office. Cleaning and X-rays. January. No crown notes. He didn't change it. Delaney coughed into his fist, a sound padded with deference. Sometimes, in accidents, features can be swapped? I asked. Changed? Crown Fairy? He blanched, then recovered with professional speed. The county medical examiner made the determination. We follow their documentation. I pressed my thumb into the edge of the paper until it left a crescent in my skin. I'd like copies. He nodded, already moving to the copier, grateful for a task. The machine woke in a shudder and laid warm pages in my hand. The heat soaked the damp out of my fingertips for a second, an odd mercy. In the hallway, Lila intercepted me, her umbrella still dripping onto the carpet. Why are you harassing Mr. Delaney? She asked. This is hard enough. I'm getting paperwork, I said. For what? Her voice pitched higher, a string tightened. We agreed, no drama. He didn't want an open casket. We didn't agree, I said. You decided, and I was out of air. I took a breath. The dental record is wrong. Oh my God, she said, hand to her chest as if clutching pearls would make me reasonable. Nora, grief does this. It breaks time. Please stop. I looked at her, her neat bob, her wedding band tan line, her insistence that order could be stapled to chaos if you used enough forms. You think I want this? I asked. You think I don't want to go home and sleep for a month and wake up and have him making coffee and cursing the beans like they insulted him personally? Her eyes softened for a flicker, then hardened again. Don't make this about you. It is about me, I said. And him. Outside, the rain had quit. The sky hung like wet felt, and the cedars dripped on their own schedule. I walked the long row of cars until I found mine and sat with the door closed, the world reduced to the tick of my cooling engine and the fog my breath painted on the windshield. I unfolded the note again and put it on the steering wheel. The letters were lean and practiced, like they'd been written standing up. They buried the wrong man. I unlocked my phone and searched for the county medical examiner's office. The automated voice was chipper and metallic, a bad joke in a day of bad jokes. For records requests, press 3. I pressed 3. A recorded message rattled off instructions about forms and fees. I scribbled on the back of a funeral program with the dull golf pencil I kept for parking meters. My mother called. I stared at the name and let it ring out, then texted, "I'm okay. Call you in an hour." I wasn't okay, and I wasn't going to be in an hour, but it was something to hand her so she wouldn't drive across town and fold me into a hug that would make me break. The passenger door opened without warning. I flinched so hard my teeth clicked. Avery slid into the seat, rain sparking off his hair, a camera bag bumping his hip. "Don't mace me," he said quickly. "Journalist. We emailed last month." He reached out to me, remember? I remembered the name and the hungry voice on voicemail. I hadn't called back. He looked at the note on my steering wheel and whistled softly. "Someone wants you to keep asking questions." "Or to stop," I said. "Same thing," he said, and tilted his head. "You're going to press for the report?" "I'm going to get the truth," I said, surprised at how steady it sounded. My knuckles were white on the program, the pencil point snapped. He checked the lot, then lowered his voice. "If the dental doesn't match, it's not him. That's your lever. But be smart. Ask for chain of custody logs. Transfers. Times. People get sloppy when they think grief makes you blind." I stared at him. The rain returned in a thin whisper. "Why are you helping me?" "Because he called me," he said simply. "Because he said he had a story about money that didn't add up. And because," he blew out a breath. "Because you look like someone who will pick up the lever and pull." He left as quickly as he'd arrived, the door thumping shut, his reflection swallowed by the gray cars and the wet grass beyond. I sat with the note and the photocopies and the sound of the rigs creaking still lodged in my ears. When I finally started the car, my phone buzzed face down on the passenger seat. I flipped it over, expecting my mother's second call or a bank notification that meant nothing and yet everything. Unknown number. I opened the message. 4 words, black on white, clean as a knife. "Stop asking about the crown." The autopsy report hit my inbox at 2:11 a.m., a bright square in the dark like a door opening by itself. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coat still on, the apartment quiet enough to hear the heat tick through the baseboards. The subject line, Records Request 23 to 4471, was tidy and bureaucratic, the way a snowplow is tidy right before it knocks you sideways. I clicked, and the PDF unfurled like a sheet on a hospital bed. Teeth first. A diagram marching molars like soldiers. Tooth number 14 labeled in precise type, porcelain fused to metal crown. I leaned in until the letters blurred and then snapped back into focus. My tongue found the notch in my own molar, muscle memory reaching for a joke that wasn't coming. Porcelain where gold should be. The note in my pocket seemed to pulse. My phone vibrated again. Unknown number. I almost let it go. Then I answered and heard a woman clear her throat, professional and careful. "Mrs. Carter?" "Dana with Great Cascades Insurance. First, I'm very sorry for your loss." The script waited behind her condolences like a paralegal. "What do you need?" I asked. I was too tired to be impressed by sympathy. "Your husband's employer carried a key person policy," she said. "We're coordinating with the medical examiner. It's routine. The payout is contingent on final identification." A drop of cold coffee slid down the side of my mug and pooled under my thumb. Define routine. A pause. Papers shuffled. Cross-checking identity, confirming manner of death, verifying beneficiary information. We'll need your signature on a few. Stop, I said, and surprised myself with the edge in my voice. The dental chart lists porcelain on 14. That's incorrect. She took a breath I could hear. I understand you're grieving. These details can be. Do not finish that sentence. I set the mug down quietly so I wouldn't throw it. Email me the forms. Nothing moves until I say so. Another pause, softer, like she'd reassessed me. I'll note your request. I hung up and scrolled through the report again. Under chain of custody, times lined up like obedient numbers. Body recovered at 2:03. Transferred to me transport 2:17. Boat towing logged 2:45. The boat lagged behind the body by almost half an hour. My brain tilted, recalibrated. I opened a browser tab, pulled up the tow company's after-hours line, and left a message asking for confirmation of their timestamp. I kept my voice even. Hi, this is Nora Carter. I need to verify a record. Call me back. I didn't say why. I didn't say my husband's name, and I didn't say I had started to feel like a person walking through a funhouse where every mirror shows you the wrong face. At 7:30, I put on my black wool coat and drove to the police bureau, the steering wheel cold enough to bite. The lobby smelled like copy paper and a floor cleaner that tried too hard to be lemon. A bulletin board advertised a neighborhood barbecue from a summer I already missed. I asked for Detective Park and was shown to a chair that squeaked when I sat. Park came out with a notebook and the gaze of someone who counts exits as a habit. She was shorter than I expected, brown hair pulled tight, ribs of a Kevlar vest peeking at the sides like a corset. We shook hands, hers was dry and cool, mine was still damp from outside. She didn't ask me to sit. We both did anyway. I got your records request, she said, tapping the paper I hadn't filled. The gesture said, you are not the only person who knows how to document. I got the autopsy, I said. Tooth 14 is wrong. The custody times are wrong. I have a note that says they buried the wrong man. And I have a text telling me to stop asking about the crown. Park wrote crown in small neat letters, then looked up. Do you believe your husband is alive? The question came out flat, like a door number. I took a breath and watched it fog just a little in the cold air. I believe facts. The facts are bent. She watched me as if I might fracture on her desk. You're a compliance manager, right? Hospital system? I nodded. Then you know how many ways a chain can fail. She flicked her pen at the paper. Here's what I can do, I will request clarification from the ME's office and the tow company. I will not promise you a miracle. I will not promise you a murder. I didn't ask you for either, I said. Her mouth did a small curve that I think meant respect. One more thing, Mrs. Carter. Don't meet anyone alone. If someone wants you to talk in a parking garage, you bring a friend. Better, you bring me. Back in the car, my phone showed a missed call from a number with a familiar exchange. Graybridge headquarters. I called back before I could convince myself not to. Graybridge Therapeutics, legal department, a woman said in a voice smooth as an elevator. Evelyn Symes speaking. I didn't ask for legal, I said. You will, she said pleasantly. Mrs. Carter, our condolences. We're doing everything to support you in this difficult time. I understand you've been in touch with the medical examiner and with our insurer. I want to make sure you feel taken care of. Taken care of landed like a tissue over a knife. Your policy payout depends on identity being confirmed. Yes, she said. Paper clicked softly in the background, the whisper of expensive stationery. We can facilitate certain processes. Expedite forms. Liaise, so your burden is lighter. The dental record is wrong. She was quiet for a beat, long enough to hear the breath of the HVAC through the phone line. Grief distorts details, Mrs. Carter. Sometimes families fixate on. You don't get to weaponize grief against me, I said, and the words came out steadier than they felt. I want everything in writing. Every call, every promise, every condolence. I want your assurance you won't touch anything at the funeral home or the ME's office. We would never interfere, she said, all silk. You have my word. Put your word in an email, I said, and ended the call. Avery texted me a thumbs-up emoji and then, because he couldn't help himself, asked for addenda, not summaries. They hide discrepancies in addenda. I typed back, noted, and then stopped texting me advice. He sent a photo of a coffee cup with "Don't Die" scrawled in Sharpie and wrote, "Journalist Health Plan." At lunch I went to the dental clinic, because my body needed to stand where the facts had lived. The waiting room smelled like mint and fluoride, the magazines were all faces with teeth too white to be true. Dr. Nguyen wore blue gloves and a face shield and the kind of kindness that doesn't feel like a script. Marco? She repeated, eyes flicking to her screen. Yes. Cleaning and X-rays in January. She rotated the monitor toward me. There it was, a black and white landscape of bones and shadows, the glint at 14 like a coin caught by light. Gold, she said. Old but sound. Did he talk about changing it? She shook her head. He asked if he should, I said no. It was fine. Can you print that? My voice wavered on the last word. Please. Of course. The printer hummed and spit warm paper into my hands. Heat through the sheet again, that weird mercy. She lowered her voice, private even in a room none of us owned. Are you all right? No, I said. Then I said, later. In the parking lot, my phone rang. Tow company. A man whose voice had smoked for 30 years said, boat came in at 2:45. We log precise because people fight over hours. Any chance your clock was wrong? Sweetheart, he said gently, in a way that would have annoyed me on any other day, our clock sits on the phone line. The phone company don't grief. 2:45. I thanked him and sat there while a leaf skittered in circles across the asphalt like it was practicing leaving. The numbers aligned around the wrong thing like good soldiers protecting a bad general. When I pulled onto the street, I checked the rear view automatically and caught the nose of a black SUV sliding in behind me. Maybe coincidence. Maybe the whole world had bought black SUVs while I'd been learning how to breathe without thinking about it. It followed through 2 turns and then didn't, and I remembered Park, don't meet anyone alone. I wasn't meeting anyone. The warning still settled on my shoulders like another coat. At 4, my mother FaceTimed me because she refuses to be screened by text. The camera gave me my own face first, under eyes like fingerprints, hair puffing at the edges from the rain I'd walked through, lipstick bitten off. I let her see me. That was its own kind of trust. Baby, she said, voice like the warm side of a pillow, and then she looked harder at me, letting silence do what questions couldn't. You eating? Soup, I lied. You carry yourself careful, she said, narrowing her eyes. You got that look you had when your principal told you you'd miscounted the fundraiser money and you knew you hadn't. I didn't, I said. Miscount. I know, she said simply. You call me when you want me to sit with you. I'll bring greens. After dusk, the city turned to a smear of lights on wet streets. I parked under a sodium lamp that buzzed like a trapped June bug and took the printed autopsy pages and the X-ray into the living room. I spread them on the coffee table like a crime I was solving against my own life. I layered the dental chart over the X-ray and traced 14 with my finger, as if skin could verify what institutions refuse to see. My door lock scraped. I stood so fast my knee hit the table and rattled the glass. "Who's there?" My voice went high and thin, a cut wire. The lock finished turning. Then silence. Then footsteps, 1, 2, retreating down the hall. I rushed to the peephole and saw nothing but the smeared gold of the corridor light, empty. The hallway smelled like someone's cologne, something sharp and aquatic that didn't belong to anyone on my floor. When I turned back, the papers on the table had shifted an inch in the draft. I didn't sleep. I sat in a chair near the door like a guard and watched the line of light at the base of it and listened to the building breathe. Sometime after midnight, my phone delivered one email. "Please see attached as requested." Attached was a scan of a form I'd left at the records office that afternoon. My signature. Under it, in different ink, a notation, "Crown replaced, see addendum." The addendum field was blank. At dawn, thin and gray, I drove to the precinct again. Park met me in the parking lot, coffee in hand, breath fogging. "You look like you wrestled a night," she said. "Someone was at my door," I said. "Or wanted me to think they were." Someone annotated my request after I submitted it. She studied me and then the coffee in her hand like she wished it were a shield. "I'll pull the lobby camera. And I'll ask the county who can alter filings." She tipped her chin at my folder. "You bring copies?" "2 sets," I said. "One for you, one for a reporter who won't publish until you tell him he can." "Good," she said, and something eased in her posture, like I'd answered the question she hadn't asked. "Are you going to be reckless or relentless?" She flipped to the chain of custody times and swore without moving her mouth. "We will get clarity. Mrs. Carter, Nora, be smart. The next 72 hours matter." I nodded and walked to my car, heart hammering against the paper stack. The air smelled like diesel and rain. I slid behind the wheel and turned the key. The wipers swept once, clearing a fog of condensation, and that's when I saw it. Under my driver's side wiper blade, tucked neat as a ticket, a white strip of paper snug against the glass. I stepped out into the drizzle, fingers shaking, and pulled it free. No envelope. For words, block letters, ink that didn't run in the wet. 72 hours. Choose silence. The lock didn't give, it sighed. When my key turned, the door swung 6 inches and stopped against the chain I hadn't set. The little brass latch rocked, clink clink clink, and my stomach turned over like a fish in a bucket. I pushed the door with my foot and listened. Nothing. No TV hiss, no pipes, no neighbor arguing on speakerphone. The air inside smelled wrong, lemon cleaner on top of something aquatic and sharp, a cologne I didn't own. I slid my hand through, unhooked the chain, and stepped in on the balls of my feet the way my mother used to when I was sleeping. The living room wasn't ransacked, it was edited. The stack of papers I'd left on the coffee table had been squared into a tidy pile, edges aligned like a threat disguised as a favor. The carpet held a few damp footprints shaped like half-moons. Someone had wiped their shoes before they remembered not to care. On my desk, the little blue spiral notebook I kept for passwords and reminders had a rectangle of dust where it used to be. In its place, a yellow sticky note, "Stop. Crown." My hands started to shake before the rest of me could catch up. I took a picture of the note, then of the footprints, then of the knob where the chain had been messed with, because if I learned anything in compliance it was, take the picture before someone talks you out of what you saw. I backed out, locked up, and called Park from the hallway. She answered on the second ring, voice clipped, like she'd been expecting me. They've been in my place, I said. They took a notebook. They rearranged my life to prove they could. Come downstairs, she said. Wait in your car. Don't go back in. I have to. Don't, she said, because she could hear the part of me that wanted to catalog what else they'd touched. I'm sending a unit. Sit tight. I sat in my car with the windows up, hands on the wheel at 10 and 2 like a teenager. When the cruiser rolled in, the officer who stepped out was young and pale and tried to put his hand on my forearm the way people do when they want you to melt for them. I cut my eyes at the hand, it withdrew, embarrassed. Park arrived 5 minutes later with a camera bag and a comm that made me believe I might borrow it. She listened, took her own photos, and then looked at the sticky note like it had said her name. They're escalating, she said. And they want you to know it. I'm done being polite, I said. What's the fastest way to get a judge to let me open the ground? Not a press conference. Not a tweet. A legal way. She studied me for a heartbeat. You need counsel with a spine and a calendar. She scrolled and handed me her phone. Maya Ortega. Civil litigator. She scares judges without making them admit it. Maya met me that afternoon in a conference room with a view of the river and a table so glossy I didn't want to touch it. She wore a gray suit that fit like a plan. When she shook my hand, she did it like an equal, no extra squeeze, no tilt of the head that said poor thing. I've read your emails, she said, sliding a legal pad toward me. Tell me the parts you didn't write down. I told her about the lock sighing and the note that was both a word and a blade. I told her about the crown and the timestamps that argued with themselves. I handed over the X-ray, the autopsy scan, the photo of the wiper note, 72 hours. Choose silence. Maya's pen moved like a violin bow, swift and precise. We'll file a motion to exhume, she said. We won't accuse anyone of murder. We'll accuse uncertainty. Judges hate uncertainty. What if they say no? We appeal, she said. But we won't have to. We'll ask for limited, non-invasive inspection first, in situ scans, hardware documentation. Then full exhumation under video if irregularities appear. She glanced up. And irregularities have already appeared. A clerk came in with a stack of forms and a smile that didn't quite land on her face. She asked for ID and looked longer at my driver's license than she had to, then double-checked the spelling of my name like Carter could be Trixie. I held my temper in my teeth and reminded myself I came for results, not an apology. We filed before the courthouse closed. The motion was a brick wrapped in silk, exhibits tabbed in blue and yellow, post-its whispering "see attached," my affidavit signed with a pen that left ink as smooth as breath. As we left, a man in a navy suit paced the hallway on his phone. He looked like a person whose job was to look like he belonged everywhere. He didn't glance at us once. That, I've learned, is its own kind of glance. The judge set a hearing for the next day. That night I slept on my mother's couch because she told me she'd come to me or I'd come to her, and either way there'd be greens on the stove by the time the sun quit pretending. Her apartment smelled like onion and vinegar and a little bit of hair grease. It smelled like a place nobody got to edit. When I woke at 4:12, she was already at the table with a Bible and a pen, underlining something with her lips moving. She didn't look up, just turned the page like she'd been expecting me to walk through the dream's last wall. In the morning, we stood in a courtroom the color of coffee. The judge's nameplate said Armand in shiny black letters, and he wore patience like a collar. Maya argued like a person threading a needle in a moving car. She used words like probative and custodial anomalies, and then, when she needed to, she said, plain and human, her husband deserves to be correctly named. A living man deserves not to be buried by clerical error. The county's lawyer adjusted his tie and said burden and precedent and tried to make the word grief do a job it didn't have. Judge Armand didn't smile, but I felt something change in the room the way you feel a storm before the rain. He granted limited inspection that afternoon under county supervision, no opening, not yet, but photographs, scans, documentation of any non-standard hardware. If irregularities are documented, he said, tapping his pen, we will proceed to exhumation under full video. Outside the courthouse, the wind came up off the river and pushed my coat around my knees. Avery appeared from nowhere, hair damp, eyes bright. You got half a win, he said. That's how whole wins start. Don't publish, I said, and he put his hands up like I was pointing a weapon. I won't, he said. But I'm coming to the cemetery. Then you stay behind the line, Park said, somehow already there, coffee in one hand, warrant in the other. She looked at me. You ready? Greenridge in daylight was less lonely, more official. The groundskeeper pointed us toward the plot like a man sending us into a room we'd regret. Floodlights hummed even though the clouds were enough. The caretaker rolled back the artificial turf, the mahogany lid had a thin halo of damp where the condensation had bled out and beaded, then dried. Photograph everything, Maya said to the county tech, who nodded like a person saving receipts. Avery shouldered a small case and glanced at me as if asking permission to breathe. Non-invasive, he said, and unzipped it. He pulled out a palm-sized reader and a roll of blue painter's tape. If there's an NFC tag, it'll chirp. Park raised an eyebrow. Why would a casket have a tag? Why would a crown be porcelain when it's gold? I said. Avery ran the reader along the brass handles, slow as a prayer. The device beeped once, sharp and eager. He froze, then backed up and tried again. Beep. He looked at Park. That's not standard. The county tech crouched, examined the seam where the lid met the lip, then frowned. There's a non-factory fastener. Who installed this? Document, Maya said. Every screw, every scratch. Park knelt beside the handle, gloved, and felt along the underside until her fingers found a catch. She looked up at me to make sure I was watching. Then she pressed. A small panel popped loose, invisible until it wasn't. Inside, nested like a secret in a secret, was a piece of heat-shrink tubing the size of my thumb. Someone had wrapped it in a strip of funeral home invoice paper like a joke and wedged it into the void. Park didn't touch it. She looked at the county tech. You bag it. My hands stay off. Chain of custody. The tech slid on a fresh pair of gloves, lifted the tiny bundle with tweezers, and dropped it into an evidence bag. He wrote the time on the seal. The sound of the Sharpie against plastic was the loudest thing in the world. What is it? I asked, and my voice was hoarse like I'd run. Avery grinned in a way that made him look 10 and reckless. If it's what I think it is, he said, it's either a tracker or a drive. Or both, Park said, eyeing the edges. We open it somewhere that air is boring and safe. We went to Avery's newsroom because it qualified. Windowless, humming with server heat, the place smelled like coffee grounds and old toner. He sat at a desk with a laptop that wasn't connected to the world. Park stood behind him with her arms crossed, not touching, witnessing. Maya called the judge to report the irregularity and request same-day exhumation authorization. The line rang and rang, her jaw worked, and she left a message that was all blade and no smoke. Avery cut the heat shrink with nail scissors, careful as a surgeon. Inside was a micro USB drive, the cheap kind you buy at a pharmacy in a rush. He held it up between thumb and forefinger like a fishhook. Ready? He asked no one and everyone. Wait, Park said, and handed him a fresh evidence bag to set beside the computer. If content loads, we record screen in time. You don't copy. You don't email. You show. I sat because my knees suggested it. My palms were damp against each other, they smelled like the lemon cleaner from my apartment, my mother's greens, the metal tang of cemetery air. Avery slid the drive in. The laptop thought, a little spinning ring like a held breath, then a ding. One folder appeared. Inside, a single audio file, timestamped 3 weeks ago. The file name was nothing, voice.m4a, like whoever named it thought camouflage was better than poetry. Avery looked at me. Park looked at the screen and nodded at my face, like she was giving me privacy I hadn't earned. I nodded. He clicked play. The speakers hissed softly, then a voice I knew down to the shape of its vowels said, low and steady, if you're hearing this, it means. They buried the wrong man. Marco's voice filled the little newsroom like heat. Not a recording from a wedding toast or vacation, this was low, paced, the way he talked while double-checking a spreadsheet line by line. I gripped the edge of the desk, fingertips squeaking on laminate. My mouth remembered the shape of his collarbone, my ears counted every breath he took between sentences. If you're hearing this, he said, stop trusting official. Check the Crown. Get the chain of custody logs. They switched the identification addendum. It wasn't an accident. Park's pen stopped moving. Avery's knee jiggled, fast and invisible, the only part of him that showed nerves. I found it by mistake, Marco went on. Paper rustled, like he was reading from a notebook. Graybridge pushed R&D spend to qualify for orphan incentives. 8.4 million in trial operations routed through 3 shells, Seaward Analytics, Northstar Reimbursement, Kestrel Data, same directors, same P.O. box, same IP stamp on the invoices when you strip the PDF. The sites don't exist. The patients don't exist. The money does. His voice thinned, as if he'd leaned away from the mic to check a door. When he came back, the consonants had edges. I flagged it. Someone erased my flags. Then the coroner's contractor helped with dental record digitizing after the accident, names in the funeral home's vendor stack, look for a tech firm that doesn't belong. They added a line to match a body that wasn't me. The body was already on ice waiting for a name. I can't tell you which part scares me more. I tasted metal, my tongue had found the place I bite when I'm trying not to cry. Park stood straighter without moving, the way a dog hears a whistle you can't. Do not take money, Marco said softly, like he was talking to me in bed right before the alarm. Lila will push it. The company will call it closure. It's a collar. Nora, listen to me, don't trust the family. Something under my ribs went hot and cold at the same time. Avery glanced at me and looked away, respectful enough to make me want to slam a door. If I get grabbed, Marco said, look in storage locker B17 at Riverfront Storage. Cash box under 1997 taxes, decoy. The rest is ledgers, PDFs, 2 burners, a Polaroid. If I can swing it, I'll take a picture with the Tribune so you know the date. If you don't hear from me, give everything to law enforcement who will play it straight. Not corporate. Not county. You'll know who to trust when they say show me the chain before they say sign here. A pause. I folded my hands together to stop the shaking. I wanted to crawl into the sound and live there. I'm sorry for leaving badly, he said, voice dropping like a curtain. I thought faking death would buy us safety. It bought me a countdown. I love you. 1 page at a time. The file clicked to silence. The hum of servers rushed back, the newsroom's only applause. Park exhaled like she'd been underwater. We have to lock this down, she said, already reaching for a chain of custody bag for the laptop. No copies. Judge hears this within the hour. Wait. I caught the evidence bag. He said funeral home vendor stack. The invoice wrapped around the drive. Avery, you kept the paper? He produced it from a second bag like a magician's sad handkerchief. The strip had a logo, Delaney and Sons, an invoice number, and at the bottom, under hardware, something that looked off, a supplier name I didn't recognize. Funeral homes don't buy brass from Shoreline Data Partners, Avery muttered. That's a guy in a hoodie with a Shopify. Park snapped a photo, then another with a ruler in frame. We'll subpoena Delaney's procurement. If Shoreline paid for the handle, Shoreline put the hidey hole in the handle. Maya called back, voice sharp with victory. Judge Armand is granting full exhumation based on the irregular hardware, new evidence, and the audio. Strict video, continuous custody. We go today. Before we go dig, Avery said, can we swing past Riverfront? Park gave him a look that said he was a child, then she looked at me like I was a person. We don't open anything without me and a camera. I'm not asking to be reckless, I said. I'm asking not to bury this twice. Riverfront storage stretched a block long, orange doors in a row like mouths you didn't want to see open. The office smelled like stale coffee and a hook rug. The manager scanned my ID and clicked a keyboard like he was playing percussion. Be building, he said, not looking up. 17's at the corner by the pine. You got a lock? Park held up a new disc lock in a plastic clamshell. Avery carried his camera. I carried keys and the kind of breath you count. The wind pushed freezer air through the corridors, carrying the smell of dust and cardboard and the pine that didn't cover the oil at the driveway. The door to B17 stuck, then slid with a metal gasp. Inside, bankers' boxes stacked too high, neat as soldiers, black Sharpie words on the sides, taxes 1997, vendor AG, vendor HN, trial reimbursements, phones. On top, a little fireproof cash box like the ones people buy for passports and then put birthday cards in. Avery went for it. Park clicked her tongue. No. We do this like someone will fight us in court. She shot video with her phone, timestamp visible, then had me narrate, name, unit, date, time. Open the box. I lifted the lid. Inside, a foam cutout for a gun, empty, plus a false bottom. Beneath, a stack of 20s rubber banded, and a smaller box taped shut with blue painter's tape. It rattled when I turned it. A phone charger fell out of a side pocket, cheap and brand new. Open the smaller one, Park said. Inside were two burner phones, dead, a thumb drive twin to the one from the casket, and an envelope labeled with Marco's scrawl, proof. The envelope tasted like dust when I tore it. It gave up a Polaroid. In it, Marco stood in a doorway, thinner, beard scruff painting shadows under his mouth. He held up the Portland Tribune, front page date stenciled in a font I knew too well. The photo had that Polaroid green to it that makes skin look like memory. My knees tried to go. I sat on the concrete and pressed the Polaroid to my chest, not because it was holy, but because my body needed to remember where he went. Avery pretended to film the ceiling. Park crouched, eyes level. He's alive, she said, without exclamation points, like a person acknowledging weather. A car idled at the end of the aisle. Then another. The air tasted like exhaust and math. Park peered out, her mouth a thin line. We're done, she said. Bag and go. We taped everything closed and walked back slow so we wouldn't look like prey. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't look until we were in the car and the doors were shut and the world was outside again. Unknown number. A text stood alone on the screen, black letters the size of a fingernail. If you want Marco alive, come alone. Pier 47. Midnight. Avery read it over my shoulder and said a word that wouldn't help in church. Send it to me, Park said. Then delete it. Then turn off your phone. You're not going to tell me not to go, I said. I'm going to tell you you're not going alone, she said. I'll write it up for the judge, Loop and the AG. We'll own the pier before midnight. I nodded, but the text burned my palm through the glass like a hot coin I couldn't hold and couldn't drop. He said alone, I said, hating the hope in my voice. That's because alone is when people disappear, Park said. We do this loud. Back at the funeral home, Delaney's hands looked older. When Park laid the Shoreline invoice in front of him, his lower lip did a small, involuntary shake. They said it was ceremonial, he whispered. Who's they? Park asked. He swallowed. A consultant. Shoreline. They paid the bill direct. I didn't, I should have. You're going to hand me every invoice you have with their name on it, Park said, voice soft and lethal, and then you're going to go home and not take any calls you don't recognize. We left with copies and the sound of Delaney's breath chasing us down the hall. The afternoon went blue at the edges. The AG's office called back for the audio. Maya whispered scalpel words into a phone until a clerk with a voice like gravel said the exhumation team was en route. I drove home with my shoulders somewhere near my ears and my mother's greens cooling on the passenger seat because I'd forgotten to eat again and she'd left them on my stoop like a blessing. Twilight pulled the city down like a shade. I set 2 plates because muscle memory is rude like that. I didn't sit. I walked from window to window the way you do when you wait for something to happen and don't want to give it the gift of a chair. The first star, or a plane pretending, hung above the cedar. My phone was off. It still felt like it was ringing. At 9, the doorbell buzzed, one short angry sound. I went to the peephole and saw no one. The hallway was empty except for a shadow at the end that might have been a ficus and might have been a man. I let my breath out in a shape that wasn't quite a prayer. On the mat lay a white envelope, unsealed. I picked it up with 2 fingers and carried it to the kitchen like it might be made of teeth. Inside was a single strip of paper torn from a legal pad. Block letters. Same ink. No cops, Nora. Or hear a splash. Midnight smelled like diesel and old fish. When I stepped onto Pier 47, the wood flexed under my boots with a tired groan, and somewhere a rope thumped a metal cleat in a slow, patient heartbeat. A gull screamed once and went quiet, like even the birds knew better than to witness. I came alone, on paper. The Mike Avery sewed into my coat hem tickled my knee with every step, and the tiny camera button stitched into my lapel watched my breath fog and shred in the cold. My phone was off. A burner, one of Marco's, sat dead in my pocket in case someone patted me down and needed to feel a rectangle. Carter. The voice arrived before the man did, knifing out of the dark between 2 stacks of crab pots. He wore a beanie and a jacket the color of wet asphalt. The kind of clean-shaven face that has no memory. He moved like a person who'd practiced not being noticed until it made him visible. You said alone, I said, stopping 6 feet short. The water slapped pilings below with a patient, killing sound. The sodium lights painted everything the color of old teeth. He smiled without involving his eyes. You listen well. You brought me to a pier to compliment me? To help you, he said lightly. Closure is a service. Funny, I said. That's what your lawyer called it. The smile thinned. Where's the data? Safe, I said. The mic inside my hem felt like a cricket trying to warn me. Where's my husband? He made a TSK noise. Your husband is a man who took things that were not his. He's sorry for that. He wants to make it up to you. He wants you to stop. The sea carried the stink of kelp and rust and a sweetness like something gone too long. Behind the stacked pots, a shape shifted, just a rat. I rolled my shoulders to feel the mic somewhere beyond the pier, a car door shut, far away. Park had promised me distance, distance had a sound. "Show me proof of life," I said. He pulled a phone from inside his jacket, scrolled, turned the screen toward me. A video blinked open, a man at a distance, walking between storage rows. Grainy. The date stamp in the corner like a tattoo. He never looked up. "That's a back," I said. "My husband has a face." He pocketed the phone. "You want too much. You always did. You're an HR lady, policy and boxes and signatures. You like your little chains." "I love chains," I said. "They keep hands off the evidence." I let my voice soften the way I did with hostile physicians at work. "Listen. You and I both want this to end without blood. There's a judge. There's a narrow path. I can help you walk it." He laughed in a way that made me cold. "You think I'm worried about court?" He took one step closer. His hand twitched near his pocket and then decided against it. "You're going to sign a release. The insurance pays. You tell people grief broke your memory, and you make a speech about closure. A nice one. We'll write it. And in return, people stop getting hurt." "Who's hurt?" I asked, and hated the hook in my voice. He tilted his head toward the black water. "People who believe in swimming lessons." I swallowed. The pier boards gave a small sympathetic creak under my weight. I kept my hands out, palms bare and open like I was showing him I hadn't stolen anything. "I'll say this once," I said. "If I disappear, you don't get quiet. You get a raid." "On who?" he said, amused. "On the wind?" "On very specific people," I said. "With very specific invoices. Shoreline paid for a coffin handle it doesn't make. Your coroner's tech left fingerprints on an addendum they didn't author. Your lawyer texts from her personal phone when she forgets to use the app. People are sloppy when they think grief makes us blind." The light hit his cheekbone and turned it to bone. The smile leaked away. He stepped in, fast enough to be threat, slow enough to be called an accident later, and reached for my lapel like he was brushing lint. The taser appeared in his other hand, a little black mouth open to scream. "Phones," he said, and his eyes finally woke up. "Mics. The Girl Scout cookies." I raised my hands. My heart thumped harder than the rope. "Take it easy." He patted me, efficient. The mic in my hem survived the sweep. He pressed the taser to the outside of my thigh, not quite touching, the way an adult puts a finger too close to a child's face. "I'm not touching you." "Repeat after me," he said, low. "I will not speak to law enforcement. I will not sign anything I haven't read," I said, and smiled with my teeth. "You brought paperwork?" That made him glance backward, the way predators check for other predators even when they think they own the night. In that glance, the pier changed. I felt it in the air, the weight of attention pressing down. Somewhere, a little red light winked on and off, and I knew it was our lens, not theirs. He noticed. "You brought friends." "They're not alone," I said softly. A gull lifted and screamed at nothing. The man's jaw tightened. He clipped the taser back to his belt in one angry motion and leaned close enough for me to smell the mint on his gum. "Last chance," he said. "Silence buys peace." "Silence buys graves," I said. The world broke beautifully. From the far end of the pier, boots thudded. A light flared white and mean. The man jerked, the taser cleared leather. "Hands," a voice barked, amplified and metallic over the slap of water. Hands. He grabbed for me instead, fist in my coat, yank and pivot. The pier rushed sideways, the railing hit my hip and made a black star in my vision. My knee cracked wood. The taser snapped electric and bit the air. I heard Park, clear and furious, "Don't shoot. Don't shoot. Contact only." I did what my mother would call foolhardy and what my body called we're out of options. I went dead weight, the way you do with toddlers. His grip slid. I brought my head up, hard, and caught his chin. His teeth clicked, the taser spat. He swore, short and ugly. He drove the taser down into the meat of my thigh and the world shrank to white and heat. I kept breathing. That's all I did right. I kept breathing and I said, "We needed a body," into the space between us, loud enough for the mic to love it, and his mouth, God bless pride, answered, "We just needed a body." Park hit him like a door. The taser skittered, cheeping like a crazy bird, and slid under a pallet. Hands took my elbows, somebody's jacket dropped over my shoulders, and the air returned in ragged, wet chunks. The man went down hard and came up hissing. Zip ties sang. The pier steadied itself. My thigh sang a new song. "Chain," Park said to no one in particular, breathless and controlled. "Start the clock." Somewhere far behind us, the city breathed and kept not noticing. Park's face appeared in front of mine, outlined in amber. "You with me?" "I'm here," I said, which had begun to feel like a vow. Avery came out of the dark with his camera pointed down, obedient, eyes wide, mouth bitten to blood. "You okay?" he whispered, like maybe the word okay had ever meant anything. "No," I said. "Yes." "We got him?" "We got him," Park said. She turned her head and made a series of clipped calls into the radio, words I'd come to love, execute. "Green on Graybridge." "Me on site." "Start exhumation." The night folded into two tracks, the pier, where they walked the fixer past me and his eyes tried to inventory mine, and the cemetery, where floodlights snapped on with the tender cruelty of hospitals. Park put me in a cruiser with the heat on high and the window cracked an inch for the smell of river to prove I hadn't imagined it. Through the glass, I watched the AG sedan roll past, lights off, faces lit by dash glow. Minutes became a shape I couldn't hold. My phone, back on, lit with texts from Maya, each one a breath, order signed. Me on scene. Video rolling. Lid documented. Proceeding. The last one came with a photo I couldn't have made up if you'd given me a year, a close shot of a molar under portable light, the metal winking dull and yellow. Number 14, gold. I laughed and cried at the same time, which sounds like choking when you're sitting alone in a car at the edge of a pier. Park tapped the window and I handed her the phone. She looked, then looked back at me, and nodded once like a coach whose team finally ran the play clean. "My husband wasn't in that coffin," I said, and the sentence built a floor under me. "Not that husband," she said. "We'll confirm with the femur plate, the serial will kill the doubt." And then what?" I said, because you don't ask what you really mean, not out loud. She opened her mouth to answer and her radio replied for her, a man's voice, tinny through static in triumph. "Me to command. Femur plate serial does not match hospital record for the decedent's chart. Repeat, does not match. Tattoo mismatch confirmed. Wrong body." A chorus of professional yes crackled back. Across town, someone zipped a bag, someone signed a line, someone pretended not to hear their career shudder. On the pier, the fixer twisted once against the zip ties and stopped when the plastic bit. He stared at me like he could still sell me silence if he found the right price. "Now we move," Park said, already half-turned. "Warrants are hot. Servers go first." "Evelyn," I said, savoring the name like a bitter pill. Is she waiting up for her phone to ring? Let's ring it, Park said. They loaded me into an unmarked with a blanket that smelled like clean dust and brass. The city slid past, empty and guilty. My thigh throbbed a second heartbeat under denim. Avery texted from the other car, a single line that made my breath trip. They want you at the cemetery for ID confirmation. Can you stand? They handed me blue booties and a mask at the edge of the grave like I was visiting a clean room instead of a hole in the earth. Floodlights bleached the grass to paper. The generator's hum settled into my bones. It smelled like hot metal and the sweet rot of wet soil. A camera on a tripod blinked a red eyelid. The medical examiner, gray ponytail, eyes like rain, met my gaze just long enough to make me feel like a person, not a problem, then turned to work. We'll document aloud, he said for the record. Time is 3:12. Continuous video. Chain intact. I stepped onto plywood sheets set like a walkway over mud. My thigh throbbed where the taser had kissed me, a bruise writing itself beneath my jeans. Park appeared at my elbow, her voice pitched low. Nora. If this is too much. I came to stand, I said, and meant it. They lifted the lid a precise inch, then 3, then set it aside. The air changed, the copper sting of blood long gone, the sweet chemical of preservation, the faint oldest smell of being a body on a planet. I swallowed hard and did not look away. Gloved hands lifted a sheet. The camera leaned in. Right maxillary molar, the me said. A portable light flooded the mouth in cold brilliance. There it was, a tooth that winked dull yellow. Old gold. I thought of popcorn holes, jokes in kitchens, a tongue worrying edges. 14, the me confirmed, voice even. Gold crown present. I breathed out a piece of myself I hadn't noticed I was holding. Park pressed her shoulder into mine for a second, enough. They moved methodically, tattoo citations, femur plate, serial numbers read aloud. Does not match hospital record named to the decedent, the me said. Identification inconsistent with Margot Carter. He sealed his words with staples on forms. The sound was domestic and violent at once. Maya arrived wind-chapped and victorious. Warrants executed, she whispered. Servers mirrored. Counsel detained for questioning. The contractor too. Her smile was not a smile. They tried to call you. We let the voicemail die alone. Avery hovered at the perimeter, lens down, cheeks red from cold and adrenaline. He met my eyes and mouth gold like a prayer. They closed the coffin. The workers reset straps with the same quiet care I'd heard the first time, and the sound no longer hurt in the same way. We signed where we had to. The me slipped the forms into an evidence satchel and locked it like someone putting an infant into a car seat. The generator coughed once and went on humming. At dawn, the courthouse lights lived before the city did. We sat in a conference room with paper cups and stale cinnamon rolls nobody ate. The AG, ready from lack of sleep, read charges like beads: conspiracy to commit fraud, insurance fraud, obstruction, tampering with records. He spoke in the plain present, like this, a thing that had already happened, was still happening. Evelyn Symes arrived with a blowout and a lawyer whose suit cost as much as a car. She did not look at me. When the charges were read, she blinked 3 times, slow, the only way her face admitted shock. The fixer from the pier sat with a split lip and eyes that had learned how to see without seeing. He looked at the table. Good. Let him memorize laminate. Park stood behind the AG. She never took her eyes off the papers as they slid across the wood like small moving continents. When it was my turn to sign my statement for the record, my hand went steady. Digitally printed letters waited, ink made them real. One page at a time, I heard in my head, and I wrote my full name clean. By noon, Avery's editor had the stack but not the story. We publish when indictments unseal, Avery said, almost gleeful with restraint. Not before. His hands were shaking, he hid them in his pockets. You're a hell of a source, Nora. I'm not a source, I said, tired smile pulling. I'm a person who wouldn't let the wrong man wear my husband's name. The AG's investigator walked me to a window and kept his voice low. We can arrange a short meeting, he said. Supervised. No phones. He has to stay dark while we roll up the rest. He didn't say Marco. He didn't have to. The world brightened and narrowed at once. They took me to a room made of beige walls, beige chairs, beige clock with a second hand that did laps like a swimmer. The hum of HVAC in distant printers made a domestic kind of white noise. I could smell my own nerves, salt and metal, and the paper of the visitor form I had crumpled in my fist. He came in thinner, haunted at the edges the way a building looks after a freeze. When he said my name, Nora, it landed in my chest like something heavy set down carefully. I stood and didn't touch him. He stopped a foot away and looked at my face like there were pages to read. His eyes were the same, curious even now. It's unfair, the way bodies carry the continuity of people who have made terrible choices. You look, he said, then cut himself off, regrouped. You look like you. You look like someone who hasn't slept, I said. I haven't, he said. I'm sorry. For what part? I asked. It came out gentler than it could have, which surprised us both. He ran a hand over his beard, more habit than grooming. For thinking I could outmaneuver them by playing dead. For leaving badly. For asking you to carry a thing I should have carried better. He lifted his eyes to mine and didn't look away. For making you bury anyone. We sat. The clock ticked. The guard stood in the doorway and stared at a point in middle distance like good guards do. They have the ledger, I said. The phones. Your audio. The wrong body video from the cemetery. They have timestamps and a fixer who said out loud what he should have kept caged. The exhumation's clean. You gave us enough. He nodded like a man listening to a weather report that finally made sense. I thought if I stepped off the board, the game would stop. It doesn't. It just moves without you. You can't fix a lie by dying, I said. My voice did not shake. If we move forward, we do it with ink. No more disappearing. No more asking me to keep secrets that break my face when I try to hold them. He made a sound that might have been a laugh if it weren't cracked. Ink, he said. Got it. They gave us 10 minutes. We used 8 studying each other like an exam with no retake. I didn't hold his hand. He didn't ask. Some loves repair into new shapes. Some stay scars you can live with. When the guard cleared his throat, we stood at the same time, like choreography learned too young. In the hallway after, Park leaned against the wall with a cup of coffee and a look that said she'd seen both too much and enough. You all right? She asked. I will be, I said, and saw that it was true. Not a poster. Not a speech. A small solid thing that fit in my palm. At home that night, I peeled the gauze off my thigh. The bruise bloomed violet and green, a planet with weather. I warmed my mother's greens and ate them at the counter with the lights low and the radio hopelessly soft. The apartment smelled like onions and lemon cleaner and me. I locked the chain with my hand on the metal until it pressed a crescent in my palm. I opened a new blue spiral notebook and wrote 3 phrases on the first page. Check the crown. Chain of custody. 1 page at a time. I underlined the last one, not too hard, so the paper wouldn't tear. Avery's story went live 2 days later, after the indictments. It was clean and mean and fair. He used clips of the audio with just enough redaction to keep what needed keeping. My voice appeared once, low and steady, silence buys graves. I listened once and then closed the tab and washed dishes because life insists. The calls came anyway. Reporters who weren't Avery. People saying you're so brave, like that was a coupon I could redeem. Lila left a message that started with a sob and ended with "How could you?" I deleted it before it could bruise me. My mother came over with more greens and a cake that tasted like birthdays. We sat on the couch and watched the cat in the courtyard pretend not to stalk a crow. Weeks folded into a careful shape. A grand jury did its slow, serious work. Evelyn's smile fell off page 3 of the paper. The coroner's tech was led from an office with a box containing a plant he hadn't watered. Restitution funds were proposed. A compliance nonprofit asked if I would consult. I said yes. 1 page at a time. Sometimes, at night, I heard the pier in my ear, the rope's heartbeat, the water's patient kill. Other nights I heard a different sound, the soft hiss of paper sliding into a file where it belonged. On a Sunday morning, I stood on my porch with coffee and rain in the air and watched a neighbor's kid try to blow bubbles when the air was too cold to let them live. They broke against his mitten and he laughed anyway. The sky smelled like wet cedar. The city was itself. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring out, then checked the voicemail, because I am still the kind of person who wants to know. A voice I didn't know said, polite as a hotel clerk, "Mrs. Carter, we understand you're starting a consultancy. Some of our employees may want to talk, off the record, about things they've seen. We hear you keep the tape rolling." I saved it under maybe work and put the phone face down. The porch boards creaked, a crow shouted from the power line like a heckler who'd paid for front row seats. I took another sip of coffee and looked at the notebook open on the table, its first page already marked and waiting for the next. Someone knocked, 2 quick taps, then a third that sounded like a decision.